Good evening, everybody. This is Peter Duveen back again with another installment of Civil Defense. Civil Defense. Remember civil defense? Some of you will remember civil defense in the 1960s and 1970s when people were extremely concerned about the possibility of a nuclear war with Russia and then with China when China got the bomb and I suppose North Korea. And at that time, uh, building, people were building bomb shelters. People were thinking about what might happen in the aftermath of a nuclear conflagration and how they might protect themselves. And apparently, the U.S. government thought of it more in terms of how it could preserve itself in the aftermath of a nuclear conflagration. That is, those survivors should be able to take care of themselves for the sake of the U.S. government and its persistence through history, something like that. So that is why it is called civil defense. It is actually seen as a way in which the government will maintain its existence after a disaster. It is not really necessarily seen as something that will help to preserve your life for its own sake. That's the drift that I get in reading various documents. So anyway, here we are faced with a new situation with a possible conflict with a nuclear power, namely Russia, which apparently has more bombs, more nuclear arms than the United States. Although you only need a certain number to annihilate your opponent, and Russia has far more than that, and so does the United States. But we've noticed throughout the past 10 or 20 years how disrespectful the U.S. government has been of Russia, how provocatory and how incredibly mean-spirited it has been towards Russia, as if it actually wants to pick a fight with Russia, as if it wants to start a war with Russia. It's just amazing to see this type of recklessness on the part of your own government if you wish to claim any connection with this government. It's just amazing to see this type of reckless foreign policy. Certainly has nothing to do with the common man on the street who, not too long ago, I think in 2016, elected a candidate to the presidency who actually actively campaigned for better relations with Russia. So if you think that Americans don't want better relations with Russia, don't look into the facts. Now, here we are at this crossroads, this very interesting point in history, and we want to delve more deeply, in a sense, go back to the past where people were interested in this topic of civil defense, which means, I guess, preserving yourself in the aftermath of a nuclear disaster. And we've been going over the health effects of a nuclear bomb from a book written in 1950 or in a revised version published in 1950. I'm not sure when the first edition was published, but it was published by the U.S. government, some arm of the military, written in conjunction with Los Alamos National Laboratory. And so we've been reading about the health effects, and we're going to continue tonight to do that. We're shortening these little presentations so that we can more easily upload them and so they don't bore some people completely to death, because our attention span is just not infinite. And I would rather not overestimate people's attention span. I would rather have them read something that won't take all day. or listen to something that won't take all day. Okay, so we're going to talk about biological half-life. Let's find out what this is about. From the point of view of biological effectiveness, one of the prime considerations is whether a particular radioactive element tends to concentrate in certain portions of the body from which it is eliminated slowly. In order to describe this behavior, a quantity called biological half-life has been introduced. This is defined as the period of time during which the amount of a particular radioisotope deposited in the body is reduced to half its initial value. The biological half-life of a given species thus depends on its ordinary radioactive half-life, which determines the natural rate of decay and also on the rate of its excretion from the body. So it's like the radioactive half-life of uranium is something like a billion years. That is, whereas there are other radioactive isotopes or elements that have a half-life of a day. So they're saying that is part of the equation. The other part of the equation is how quickly your body eliminates this radioactive material from your system. So, in other words, if something has a half-life of like 6 hours, it may die down, the radioactivity may die down more quickly than it takes to actually eliminate it from the body. Okay, let's go on. An isotope with a very short radioactive half-life will inevitably have a short biological half-life. But for substances with moderate or long radioactive half-lives, the biological half-life may be long or short depending on whether the particular isotope tends to be concentrated in the body or not. In general, a substance with a fairly long biological half-life is to be regarded as an internal hazard. The biological half-life of plutonium in man, for example, is very long. This indicates that once plutonium has been fixed in the body, it is eliminated at an extremely low rate, the loss being due almost entirely to the natural radioactive decay. It sticks around for some reason. I guess maybe we'll find out why. On the other hand, the biological half-life of cesium-137 is about 15 days compared with a radioactive half-life of 37 years. This element is evidently easily eliminated from the system. So even though cesium has a fairly long half-life in terms of its persistence in the body, if it were to stay there, it seems that it can be flushed out relatively quickly. In addition to the biological half-life, the injury caused by a given radioisotope in the system will depend on the region where it tends to concentrate and also on the particular radiation it emits. One reason why plutonium is such a danger is that in addition to having a long biological half-life, it expels alpha particles which have a high biological effectiveness and so are capable of causing severe local damage, even though their short range prevents them from penetrating very far. So we did read about how alpha particles, which are basically composed of 2 neutrons and 2 protons. How they can't really penetrate the skin very well, but if it gets into your body, it becomes a problem. So, there we are. Anything else here? Okay. Yeah, I was talking about plutonium. Well, stay away from plutonium. It's bad for you. I think that's the lesson here. Now we go on to another section called Sources and Effects of Internal Radiation. I'll read a little bit about this, but not much, because we're going to call this short. We're going to end this video rather quickly so that you can enjoy it without, having too much of your time taken up. Sources and effects of internal radiation. It may be mentioned that in the rare event of sufficient fission products entering the bloodstream as to become a source of danger, strontium and barium, which resemble calcium chemically, will tend to concentrate in parts of the bone. Lanthanium and cerium would be deposited in the liver. Yuck. And to a much smaller extent in the spleen. Plutonium, strontium, and barium, on the other hand, have been found in both liver and spleen. With very few exceptions, however, most radioactive substances are readily eliminated from the liver. Good thing there. Despite large amounts of material that pass through or accumulate in the kidney, this organ seems to be exceptionally resistant to the action of radiation. Which one, the liver or the kidney? I guess the kidney. Okay, so I think we're going to end it there. And thank you very much for coming tonight. This is Peter Dubin signing off for Civil Defense for April 1st, 2022.